Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, and welcome to the pod where we chat, argue, and wax poetically about the movies that we love, hate, or that are simply worth talking about. All movies have something to say, and we enjoy trying to analyze what they capture. Welcome to the Chatter After. How is everybody doing out there? I'm Brandon Alvarado, the Scarlet Fan here, and I'm so excited to be back here to talk movies. And we're not just talking any movies. We are celebrating the return of Henry Cavill to the DC universe as Superman, and we're talking Man of Steel. The Superman movie of our generation. We're talking with a great crew of people. I have the entire TCA crew and two very special guests. We got the one, Juwaan.
Hello, what's going on? Thank you for having me.
Awesome. I got my friend Isaac Wolf.
5 minutes.
Mike Thomas.
What do you guys think the budget was on this movie?
You're not going to let that one go, aren't you?
Hey, don't call it a comeback.
And the one and only creator of Superman on Film and co-host of the highly popular The Fanboy Podcast, the one and only biggest Superman fan that I've ever known in my life. And not because he's my cousin, Mayor Francisco Robles. What's up, bro?
Hey, how you doing, Primo? It's an honor to be here on TCA to have Chatter After for Man of Steel, considering you were like my test audience. You were my pilot audience for the Fanboy Podcast back in like 2013 when I was ranting about this movie and predicting what it would be and how it would go and how my life's happiness depended upon it back then. So we did an epic chatter before 9 years ago. Now we finally get to do the back end of it. So let's do this.
And the craziest thing is what people don't know, and I'm glad you mentioned that moment. We were locked inside our grandfather's apartment back in Puerto Rico, and we watched
by choice,
Superman.
By
choice, yes, it was. Nowadays, we watched Superman 1. I think we did 2 and Superman Returns. Just getting ready, getting those creative juices flowing and enjoyment. And I'm glad that you brought that up because watching Man of Steel again, preparing for this pod, was a very different experience. Not just because how much I know of the character now, how much more I'm in love with the character, but how much I've read of the character since my original viewing. I've read Birthright, recommended by you. I've read Superman Earth 1, which I love. I've read Superman Year 1 by Frank Miller, which, again, phenomenal run on Superman. And Superman's still a big icon for ages in the entire world. And I'm glad that he's going to be back in theaters very soon, not only in the cameo in Black Adam, but in his own films. But, of course, we have a way of doing things here in the Chatter After. So we're going to go around the table. We're going to talk about first impressions to Man of Steel and re-impressions as we rewatched it to start the conversation. And then we'll start digging into the film, things that we love, things that we didn't like, or just things that are worth analyzing into it. If you guys love what we do here at the Chatter After Podcast, make sure to like, subscribe, and click on the bell icon there at Novice Cinephile Network so you don't miss any episode of The Chatter After. And if you want to listen to us on the go, The Chatter After Podcast is available everywhere on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or wherever podcasts are found. Juwaan, it's your first visit to The Chatter After. So let's start with you. First impressions, the first time you saw Man of Steel and revisiting it for the pod.
Oh, man. I really thought... So for me, my first Superman was Brandon. I grew up a Batman fan, so Superman was never really that important to me. So Brandon Superman Returns is my first Superman. So I remember going, man, this is not how you should do a Superman movie. So when I got Man of Steel, it gave me something of Superman I never thought I'd have, and that's like an extreme deep care about the character, because it didn't come off as just the ultimate Boy Scout. Like, it was a little bit more rough around the edges, a little bit darker, almost literally, with how Zack filmed it. But it just felt so different, you know, so different than what I'm used to from what Superman gives. I really left that movie the first time thinking, this is a start to something really, really, really good. Perfect casting for Superman, great direction. And then rewatching it, I kind of still feel the same. I would have liked for it to not be visually confusing at certain points during the fight. During the last fight at the end, but I still view it as one of the best DCEU films. It's still number one for me. Nothing has topped it DCEU wise. I don't really think anything will. It was just brilliant way to bring back Superman for a lot of people who maybe lost a little faith after Superman Returns. So for me, I viewed this as one of the better superhero movies during that time. And I look back at it, still is the same.
Awesome. Mike, Superman, Man of Steel.
Yeah, this is a movie that exists. I don't hate a lot of movies. This is one that kind of hits the hate scale for me. So yeah, I'm gonna be that one guy, I guess, in the conversation that does not like Man of Steel. I love Superman as a character. He's one of my favorite superheroes. I grew up with Superman the animated series. I watched Smallville. I watched the Christopher Reeve film. So like Superman has been a part of my life just as much as Batman has. And yeah, I just couldn't get into this film, and I'll get into why as the conversation kind of goes forward. But I'm the exact opposite of Juwaan in a sense, right? Where I had that care for Superman, and this movie made me not care about Superman, which I think is fascinating.
Interesting. Isaac Wolf.
Well, I have. How should I put it? Also, I'm in a similar position as John. I wasn't the biggest Superman fan. When I saw when I saw Superman Returns, which I did before, I just said, it's all right. I didn't think it was as bad as some people claimed it was, but I didn't thought it was as good as other was. It's a running theme, Mario. I can see you're laughing right now. But it was just okay at the time. But then we go to Man of Steel, and I don't know really what it was. Maybe because I didn't have a real sort of connection like Mike has with it, for example, but it clicked, so to speak. And I actually think it's going back and I really enjoyed it. It's honestly the only DCU movies I actually seen more than once in a theater. Saw it twice, and yeah, I know.
I saw it twice.
Yeah, I know. It's not often that I'm going to the movies more than once. The one I rewatched the most in theaters is, funny enough, Detective Pikachu, which I saw 4 times, but I digress. But it's interesting because for me, I know about how people felt originally with the earlier movies, and I had a grasp on it. I have no connection, but I know no connection myself, if that makes any sense. And when I first saw it, I used to felt one of the major things I felt was, this is a solid starting point. Let's see how they continued it. And well, it's an argument of how they succeeded there, but we're not going to talking about Batman v Superman and the other movies right now. It's all about Man of Steel.
Awesome. Mario, Man of Steel.
So-
Talk to us.
Yeah. Before I'd even gone to see the film, I'd already gone way back and forth a few times in my internal hype on it, because on the surface, from the outset, when they announced it, I was excited because, okay, we were going to get a new Superman movie. I'd already gone through a whole roller coaster ride following the Superman Returns and waiting for a sequel on that, and following the 4 previous iterations to get a Superman film off the ground prior to Superman Returns. So as a fan, I'd already kind of like been on a crazy roller coaster ride waiting to see Superman finally thrive and flourish on the big screen again. And when they announced it, I was excited. But then when I found out they were bringing in Zack Snyder to direct it, Then I got a little anxious because, I like the idea that it's coming from Nolan, it's coming from Goyer. I trusted them from the Dark Knight trilogy. I still had a great reverence for Nolan at the time. I thought Goyer had some interesting stuff to say in the superhero space. I liked kind of his approach to the Batman lore in the Dark Knight trilogy. So that sold me. But then the Snyder thing threw me for a loop because I hadn't really been into Watchmen at all. And 300, I thought was like, again, with both of those films, I thought they were very high on style, very low on heart and characterization and emotional nuance. It just seemed like very visually appealing, but no real heart or soul in there for me. So I got a little anxious, and early on, I kind of like, as soon as they announced Snyder, I kind of like, I'm not sure about this. I need to see some teasers and trailers first. Then I saw the teasers and trailers and started still just barely warming up. It wasn't until trailer 3 came out that I was finally like, okay, they might have a modern day Superman classic here, the ultimate retelling of the lore. Let's do this. So right there in the last final push of the movie, I got very, very overexcited. So what ended up happening was I saw the movie. I thought it was pretty good, not great. And my main bone to pick with it was in the last act. The last 45 minutes, I felt kind of betrayed the rest of the movie because the rest of the movie had a lot of art and it was more contemplative, emotional sort of piece. And I love the way it told the Superman mythology. But then in the last 45 minutes, it just became buildings collapsing and disaster porn and Superman not showing any care for really for those around him and trying to minimize the damage. And he seemed more like some sort of blunt force instrument of just, revenge or whatever he was trying to do. He did not seem like the hero that I was trying to recognize. So I remember feeling like the end had let me down, but I had seen enough flashes of brilliance with how they had sort of restated the mythology that I was still intrigued for where they were going next. I still wanted to see a sequel. In the years subsequent to that, the things that I thought were pretty good, I've just fallen completely in love for. Like now I just love them so much that it actually makes my bone to pick with the third act far less of a big deal for me. That takes away a lot less than it used to. And now to me, it's evolved from pretty good to actually a great Superman movie that just needed to show a little more restraint there in the third act. But that's where I'm at nowadays with Man of Steel.
So, for me, I always loved Man of Steel. Like, from the moment that I came out, this is the shirt that I wore that day. It was so funny because if you go back to Facebook, Mario has a post of showing the S, and I was on the other side of the ocean because I was in Puerto Rico, I was in New York, so I had to answer in kind. But
we both had that shirt. I was wearing the
Yes.
Cavill Superman shirt. So
Yeah. Anyways,
Nice.
it's the thing. But I love this film because to me it was so. It's funny what that Juwaan brought up Superman Returns, and this is just to talk about because you guys know I love it. I already love Man of Steel, so I don't want to. I want to talk about it. But Superman Returns to me was very interesting that Juwaan brought it up and how it didn't click with him, because what I found interesting in Superman Returns is that Superman Returns is not a bad movie for what I know of the character. But instead of embracing the literature, it embraces the cinematic history of the character. Which, when you think about it and put it into contrast with the years of literature that we've had, is kind of limited. And it only shares one image or one side of the character. And of course, it tried to modernize its story a little bit with the whole kid thing and stuff like that. But you could say that when it comes to becoming a new Superman for our generation, it really tried grasping the past a lot more than it did to create a path forward, right? And that is why I love Man of Steel so much, because it felt like a clean break from anything that came before. And not only did it reignite my passion for Superman, but I felt that I was mirroring the character for the first time. It wasn't like, okay, this is something that I've seen before. No, everything's different. Everything's more in depth. We're paying attention to every single detail of what makes this person particular. And now going back to watching it for the pod, there were so many scenes that I get teared up on because, like I said before, now that I've read so many books of the character and I know him well and I've fallen in love with the character and what he stands for, now that I see all the conversations with Jonathan Kent, now that I see all the conversations with his mom, now when I see his encounters with his dad, Jor-El, and I see his innocence, there's this innocence that Cavill brings to the performance because he's just trying to find his place in the world. And he cannot be the Man of Steel that we need until he finds himself. Right. Which is why the first two parts of that movie are so great. And they embrace the literature. They embrace Birthright. They embrace Year One. Or at least Year One came after, but they embrace Earth One. And seeing all those things and what him discovering what he needs to be, or the fact that there's a choice of who he chooses to be, the fact that he chooses to be the Man of Steel. Or, correction, the Man of Steel, because he's Man of Steel regardless, the fact that he chooses to be Superman is what defines the path moving forward. So when I left the theater or when I leave watching this movie, it's like, okay, I see that this man is deciding to be this hero, and I just want to follow his drive and where he goes. And which is why now the Cavill's back, it's like, okay, we're picking up that and moving forward. Now, we had a lot of love, a lot of trouble, a lot of hate, or a lot of discomfort with the film. I feel that the best thing to do it is probably take it apart into acts or whatever. And I want to start with you, Mario. I fell in love entirely with the whole Krypton sequence. Because one of the things about the Krypton sequence in Man of Steel that I loved is, wow, the fact that we can create this world and make it so distinct and so particular and so alien-esque. Because when you go back to Marlon Brando and all that stuff, it literally feels too human-like. It doesn't feel like it's something out there. So I like how it embraced a lot of the books about how everything looks space-like, the creatures, the environment. What was your take when you saw Krypton for the first time? And again, the first testament of Zack Snyder's visual, how he saw the world that Superman came from.
Yeah. Right away, I was blown away, and I loved it, and I was hoping to get like a sequel or a TV series that's set entirely in that world. I thought it was very visionary and imaginative. I was really into seeing like the alien creatures and the alien tech that existed there. Hans Zimmer's score was hitting on all cylinders during that whole sequence. Seeing how they set up basically the building blocks of the story here, I thought was just, I thought it was handled really, really well. I felt like Snyder was treating this like he was telling something mythical. He was telling something that was grand and important. This didn't feel like some frivolous, simple, easy paint by numbers. Here's the origin you've heard about a million times in your life. This felt like the first time in a way. There was just something important and grandiose and solemn and thought-provoking to me about it. And yeah, they cram a lot of information in there. There is a lot of exposition. They have to set up the whole thing about, the sort of the caste system there in Krypton with all the the codex and how people are born into particular occupations. They had to set up the Krypton is being destroyed. They had to set up baby Kal-El getting shipped off and have the talk between Laura and Jor-El. There was a lot that had to happen there, and the confrontation between Jor-El and Zack. There was a lot of ground to cover, but I thought they did it really, really well, and I was gripped and hooked right from the outset there with that first act.
What do you think about the execution, Isaac? And to the rest, Isaac, specifically about the establishing of that lore and mythology?
Mike, do you want to go first?
He pointed you out, though, Isaac.
Okay.
Isaac, do you want to answer? Sure. Mike, what do
Okay,
you
sure.
think?
Man, he mentioned Mike also, so I was thinking, and he looked
Well,
ready.
he
But
mentioned everyone in the beginning. I was just
Okay.
introducing people. Isaac.
Anyway.
This is a podcast.
when it comes to
Isaac, we don't have the budget for all these edits, man. You gotta just go with the flow.
This is part of the fun. Yeah, here we go.
We're funny, Mike. But
What
I
was your
digress.
role in the codex, Isaac? No.
I'm,
Chaos.
I was. I'm always chaos. You know that. But honestly, the opening scene with Krypton and the whole going into how the society worked, how it looked, and all that. Yes, I'm with Mari. I wanted something that would tap into that more, be it a prequel movie, TV show, or something. Because even before I met you, Mike, for example, those that I know that disliked the movie said that the Krypton stuff. I know that people that hate the movie love the Krypton stuff. So
You're saying like you always saw that was one of the sections that was universally loved. Is what you're trying to say?
Yes, that was. I mean, so which is honestly something I'm surprised that they didn't do more. Sure, they did the Krypton part, but is that really? But is that meant to be canon to Man of Steel?
Not
The
really.
Krypton
Yeah,
show.
originally, it was going to be like a prequel series, and then they just cut ties with it a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. of the DC universe.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
But the Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. actually was good. So I mean, Krypton apparently was good in the beginning, but then they just said
Yes.
no.
And actually, can I add one thing? I'm sorry, because I realized we moved off, but I realized there was one other thing I wanted to point out about the way they set up things there in that first act that I really appreciated. I've always liked the idea that Krypton's destruction should not just be some scientific mumbo jumbo type thing. It should be something that the people of Krypton accidentally or through their own
Inadvertently.
ignorance caused. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And in there, they say that by mining the core and everything, we've accelerated the destruction of the planet, this, and that, because then it really kind of grounds Kal-El's mission on Earth in something that's really kind of like relatable and palpable. You know, it's like our people here destroyed our planet. They didn't listen to science, and they just kept on doing what they were doing, and they destroyed our planet. And now you have to go someplace and try to stop them from doing the same thing. You know, so I kind of love that sort of the allegory and all that sort of stuff. So the fact that Krypton doesn't just explode for some random, unavoidable, scientific, vague reason,
Like a loud
fact that
space fart.
yeah, like the fact that it actually gets destroyed because of
Yeah.
negligence and ignorance, and now Superman has to sort of make sure Earth doesn't do that by inspiring hope and bringing us together. I'm a big fan of all that.
And I'm glad that you brought that up. And we go to Juwaan after, unless Isaac, I don't know if you have something else to add to that. I like how that everything that they set up on that first act or sequence in Krypton all has something. It's all seeds that are sowed for the rest of the film and the rest of the through lines. Like the fact that from there to the connection between Jor-El and Kal-El to then Kal-El making that decision, Krypton had its chance. Because at this point, Krypton's already dead. So why are we going to kill all these living people just to bring people back from the dead? No, we got to save the ones that are alive. The point is to save, not to kill, to try and save. Which again, it's a great Superman move that's based, which I love the screenplay. I mean, David Goyer's screenplay, which is great. Juwaan, Krypton sequence.
I loved it. Not often do I think people outperform Russell Crowe in a scene, but Michael Shannon literally put his foot all up in it. That one line was just like, I think we all love the one line.
I will find him.
right.
No, it's the buildup. Right?
It is. It really is.
It's the 7 times he says it.
Yes.
Well, he
Iconic.
wanted to make it clear that he would find him, and he did.
It's like
the
an
man-
anime. Once you say it, it has to happen.
I mean, he's spoken into existence. Man, he's a man of his word. But no, I just really thought it was very well done. I did think, and I know I'm the only one that thought this, but I was a little upset that there wasn't any Kara mention whatsoever. I know Zack tried to kind of like throw it in there afterwards, but I'm like, it not being talked about literally at all was a little bothersome, especially if you were supposed to tell me that one already existed on Earth. Like she had already landed on Earth before him. Like, why wouldn't you say that? Like, yeah, that's how we knew to send him to Earth. We sent her to Earth. Like, I just thought that was really weird. But everything else I thought was visually pleasing. David Goyer is somebody I often do not trust because of what he did to me with the Dark Knight trilogy. So I was very pleased at what I enjoyed from from a lot of this sequence of the opening of this movie.
Mike.
Are we really gonna just let him slander the Dark Knight trilogy so casually? Just so casually.
You know
I
why?
mean-
That's
You know
a
why?
different
Because
episode.
exactly, because he thinks we're not going to bring him back to hold him accountable.
Oh, I will definitely be here for that. It's a long life.
Well, listen,
Batman
I will
fan.
help
That hurt
you
me.
bury the Dark Knight Rises, but Batman Begins and the Dark Knight. Come on now.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
We'll
I will
definitely talk about
pull
that
the
at
Dark
some
Knight
point.
Rises from the depths of the Lazarus pit.
Oh no, Dark Knight Rises is irredeemable tripe. Go on.
Go, Mike.
Speaking of which, Man of Steel. So
Oh, ow.
this
Damn.
movie, I think it's fascinating. First off, Brandon says he wants to go through this by acts. This is a 4-act movie.
Yeah.
We spend so long on Krypton. I counted. We spent 20 minutes on Krypton, and it's a good sequence. I'm not going to say it's a bad sequence, but it has nothing. It has nothing to do with the movie itself because we have scenes with Clark interacting with Jor-El, recapping this prologue anyway. So to me, it feels kind of like a waste of time. Like it feels like Zack had an idea of like, I want this really cool scene set on Krypton, and he went for it. But then they kept the part of the draft where Jor-El just tells us what happens anyway. So it's like I kind of don't understand from a narrative perspective why we either needed the scene later on or why we needed the scene at the beginning. And that's where it's kind of weird going 20 minutes without seeing Superman or Kal-El in any really major form or fashion aside
Well,
from...
did you see Superman the movie where it takes about 45 minutes before we finally see
You see?
Superman? Is that right?
You see, that movie's like 50 years old. I'm giving it a pass.
Wow.
I'm not going to sit here and say that's, peak fiction, right? It's okay. It's Superman the movie. We should be past that. We shouldn't be trying to emulate that. But
the term-
Well,
the
actually,
term-
I'm glad you used that word. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Juwaan.
No. I was just gonna say. So the term "it's so nice," you had to say it twice. It doesn't appeal to you at all, Mike? He couldn't have showed it to you, and then like, let me just tell you again how dope that was. Like that was pretty awesome.
but
You remember
I'm-
that? Like,
this isn't Naruto, man. I don't need 20 flashbacks within a flashback.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up emulating that, though. Like, that is sort of a problem with the first act, you ask me,
Yeah.
because it does very much echo the beginning of Superman the movie.
Yeah.
And I've actually written a column about this because a lot of defenders and apologists for the film over the years have decried the fact that, why do critics compare this to the Christopher Reeve movie? That was not, that was many years ago. Forget about it. But unfortunately, the way the movie is structured, it kind of begs to be compared to it, because they didn't have to open with an opening sequence on Krypton. Basically, has him giving the speech to baby Kal-El and putting him in the rocket ship, has him telling the council about Krypton's impending death and his confrontation with Zod and us seeing Zod go to the Phantom Zone. All of that was already done in Superman the movie, and it's not like that is the only Superman origin story. That's just one way they could have told it. General Zod wasn't even like a main villain of Superman's until the movie like beefed up his profile. They could have gone any number of ways with this.
He's
But
the
by
Black Adam
choosing
of that
Zod-
era.
But like By choosing Zod and by opening it with the same exact launch pad for the story, you're inviting people to compare it to that. They could have the origin story any number of ways, and they could have had any number of villains. And I bet you comparisons would not have really happened as much as they ended up.
Well, I think that was part of the plan going in, was that you were trying to merge the people of yesterday with the people of tomorrow, right? So where you had a group that's like, man, I haven't really had a Superman since Reeves, right? So you give them the feel of that. You give people a little bit of the darkness Superman Returns visually kind of gave you, in the embrace of moving forward, right? So I think they were trying to maybe hit on that, but I think for some people it was just like, no. It didn't work for me the way that you wanted it to, but I think they were definitely trying to hit on both aspects.
Yeah, my only thing on that is it's such a different way than they approached Batman Begins. Because when Batman Begins, they didn't tell a story that could be compared to the first Michael Keaton Batman movie. It was very clearly something quite different. And Man of Steel, for better or worse, kind of apes the exact sort of launch story for Superman the movie. But
I'm glad you mentioned that. Like, it's really inviting comparisons. And that, I think, is its biggest struggle with a lot of people. Because if it did try and be like Batman Begins and be something completely unique, it might have been easier for people to accept this version of Superman.
I firmly believe that.
Yeah, because Batman Begins is nothing like Batman 89. It's not trying to be like Batman 89 at all. And so it was able to carve out its own path. Same with the Batman, right? The Batman is nothing like the previous versions. Whereas Superman, for better or worse, such an iconic character, seems to stay in a rut sometimes as far as his cinematic appearances. We keep trying to tell the same version of the story instead of going completely different and unique.
Yeah, if you think about it, we're still using the same launch story from 1978, because even Superman Returns was a continuation of that, and Man of Steel told its own version of that. So it's like we haven't seen a Superman movie yet that didn't start with Zod and Jor-El's warnings, and Zod in the Phantom Zone eventually coming to Earth to fight him in Metropolis. We haven't seen a Superman movie that wasn't based on that.
Yeah. Also, before we move away from this subject, it's just really, it'll forever be dumb to me that we send Zod to the Phantom Zone as Krypton's exploding. Like, just let him die on Krypton with everyone else.
It wouldn't have fit the narrative, Mike. Goodness gracious. You got a narrative to keep up here.
Well.
All right, Brandon, steer the ship. Where we're going next?
Well, I haven't given my take based on all your conversations.
Yeah.
Because I'm here to defend the Krypton Act in Man of Steel. Yeah. So the whole point of the Krypton Act, at least the way I see it, is not just to reintroduce those scenes and those beats, right? It's all to highlight how the wrong choices destroy the people and have repercussions to the future and other places, right? Because the reason they send Zod back into the Phantom Zone is because up to this point, the council doesn't believe Jor-El. So they just send them away like it's another day of business. We're going to send them to prison and that's it. Because they're not thinking they're all going to die, right? The only person that actually believed this, even at the death of her husband and sending her kid to Earth, is Laura, right? And Zod in his own way knew that that was going to destroy it, which is why I'm actually very interested in understanding the fact that he probably had this certainty that he will find him, because one, he either thought that he was going to come back out of the Phantom Zone at some point, or two, he believed Jor-El's theory of Krypton's imminent demise. So because you have those two things, because you have that sense of kinship between Zod and Jor-El that's kind of teased, right? Which kind of makes that relationship with when he interacts with Kal-El a little bit more interesting. Now, the one theme that's cemented and presented in the Krypton sequence that to me is very important, which also justifies the Echo and also justifies what comes later on, is that the most important theme of Man of Steel is the theme of choice. The fact that everybody has a choice to do the right thing or to do the wrong thing. And when Jor-El made the choice to send his kid far away because he knew that the people in power would not try and do anything to save Krypton, he tried to save Krypton in that way because that was the only way that would have worked, right? He's not just trying to save his son, he's trying to save the people of his planet by sending the last son right over there, right? the whole thing with the Codex, the fact that choice has been taken away from its citizens for the sake of progress. That's the whole reason why they had a natural birth, because choice was something that was removed. And Zod thought that was a heresy because he thinks that the fact that roles are pre-designed or pre-assigned is what actually allows Krypton to move forward. But he can't see beyond the fact that his role as a warrior cannot see the other sides of it, and how politics get in the way and other people making bad choices destroy Krypton. The echo in that scout ship between Jor-El is very important, because that's the first time that Kal-El learns of the wrong choices. So on one side, you have Jonathan Kent teaching young Cal about how important his choice in the future is going to be. And now you have his other father telling him the consequences of the wrong choices. So he's presented by his two father figures the idea of choice, that if you don't present the Krypton sequence and sow this seed, you can build up to the fact that towards the end, he makes the choice to defend Earth and let Krypton die. So if you don't, because that's really the purpose of that Krypton sequence. It's to present that theme and then stretch it out throughout. And I defend it.
But I mean, but you could have done a similar thing with the same theme and made Brainiac the villain, or not retread this odd thing. They could have.
Agreed.
You know?
But they went with the safe bet. And again, and Michael Shannon did a great job, which I do agree with that.
Yeah.
Now the
even
whole
with Faora being like the what was her name, Ursa. Like there were so many parallels. Oh, look, the feisty, short-haired female, sidekick for Zod. Like they were begging you to think about other.
Yes. No, I don't disagree with that. All the parallels are there, but at least the execution was a tad different in terms of the themes that they were trying to present. At least I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, Juwaan mentioned something about the whole Kara thing. I find it interesting that you mentioned that because I didn't think about it, and then I think about the fact that we see the open capsule in the scout ship, which makes me think maybe the reason we don't hear about her or hear about this person, because remember, Kara is always older than Kal-El, but she looks younger because she was in cryogenic stasis or some type, or lost whatever version of her origin you choose. She always looks younger because of that, right? So what if she woke up a little bit before the United States found the chip? So she just recently woke up, which is why we don't cut to her, because she's probably trying to get a lay of the land wherever she is, which that's just my theory. Now, do you think with your ideas of the Krypton, different versions, right? And not retreading that, would you have eliminated that and start the story in the boat?
Who are you asking?
Me?
In general. Would you have started? Sorry, would you have started the movie with the boat scene?
I mean, in theory, you could have, right? It would have been it would have been like a striking beginning. We start right out in the ocean and the waves are crashing and, you're in the middle of this situation. Yeah. You could have started right there, honestly. People understand the Superman mythology so much that when you see this guy there, you get it. Like, oh, they don't know that that's Clark. Clark's hiding. I wonder why. It would kind of start things off with a bang. It would have been an interesting way to start. Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
That's very Birthright.
I agree because, again, in my notes, I have this broken down as a 4-act movie. So we could just start from the proper act 1, which would be in the boat, and have, 20 minutes on Krypton. We have an action scene, and as soon as we meet Clark, we get into another action scene, right? So if that's just the proper beginning of the movie, you just hit the ground running. And then you have a lot of questions like, how did he get here? What's going on? And it's a bit more of a mystery, because you're instantly invested in Clark, not questioning what just happened, or you're now concerned with Zod and what happened with Krypton. We start with Clark. And that's honestly one of my issues with the film as a whole is the content is solid, but we have all of these flashbacks that are kind of sprinkled throughout, and they don't really connect to the present day story for me. Like we cut from this point to Clark at school and he's having trouble with the heat vision, right? It's a really great scene with his mother, but it had no bearing on what was actually going on with Clark in present day. Like if we see him using his heat vision, in that scene, it's like he mastered it. She was able to get him to a point where he has control of that power. Go ahead, Juwaan.
I have a question. Could you say that all the flashbacks actually cater more towards the ending, where he literally had to become a superhero in 5 minutes and had no control of any of his powers? So that's why you got the, disaster porn that you got, was because he didn't know how to reel it back. He didn't know how to be like, okay, clearly that's a building with people. Let me not fly through it, or let me not use my lasers where it brings down an entire building. I think that was more so of the idea of, remember we were talking, Mike, and we were saying like, maybe it wasn't, you were saying maybe it wasn't the best idea to kind of tell your son to watch you die. But I think what goes to that is, in kind of not ever letting him use his powers, he doesn't know how to use them the one time he actually really needs to know how to use them. And it kind of plays to the idea of, I've never been able to utilize my powers before. Now you want me to save Earth. I don't know what I'm doing, right? So I'll laser a building where it falls on people. I don't know what I'm doing. Again, I might be trying to make this seem a lot better than it was, but maybe
I hear you. That's just not a movie I want to watch, but you're not wrong necessarily.
Maybe it's just, I'm just saying, maybe that's what they were trying to connect, was the idea of like.
Well, there's definitely, yeah, that's definitely the intention for one of them. The one in front of Sullivan and Company, the auto shop, when the bullies are up in Clark's face and he's grabbing the pole and he's restraining himself, and then when him and Jonathan have the talk afterward, it's about how you would have hit him, but would you have felt better afterward, and blah blah blah, and this idea of the restraint and the choice. So they definitely were trying to plant the seeds for like his whole life. He's just been holding this in, even in the restaurant scene when the guy dumps beer on his face and makes him look a fool in front of everybody. You could see like the stillness of like, he's just, his whole life, he's just had to grin and bear it. And when this guy finally lets loose, So yeah, that's definitely, I think, supposed to be some of the way to set the stage for the disaster porn to come.
Yeah.
Now, I wonder, now I kind of want to see the edit of just grab the film and just start it at the boat.
Yeah.
And I want to see what my...
started at the boat. You do the flashbacks the way they did, but then when you get to the Jor-El and Kal-El on the scout ship history lesson, that's when you can go into full-blown flashback and use the footage that would have been the first scene,
That's a better edit, in my opinion.
Right? Yeah. You could just make it one super edit.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I kind of want to watch that now. Now, I do want to watch that now. So we have him figuring out, he's trying to find answers, right? Mm-hmm. I think we can all agree that Zack Snyder just laid it thick with the whole truck scene. We didn't have to see that whole truck destroyed. We can literally edit that and say, okay, this is too much.
So, as somebody who doesn't like this movie, I want to get your opinion, Brandon, and everybody else here. One of my issues is we have that scene, right? I don't have a problem with him destroying the truck. I have a problem with, I don't know who Clark is as a person, because he does have the lack of choice. And I feel like a part of Superman's character is him being confident in who he is, right? And I understand that this is the origin we're trying to build to that, but like Batman Begins, for example, we see Bruce's parents die. We see how that affects him. And we get to the point where he decides to become a Batman. We see in Spider-Man, Peter decides to become Spider-Man. Same thing with every superhero origin. It's just very strange to me that this movie decides that Clark still reluctantly decides to become Superman when Zod shows up. Like, there was
at
no
33. Yeah.
Right. At 30, that's another thing. At 33 years old, it's kind of like, shouldn't he have some idea of who he is by that point? Like, if he was 17, like if this was Smallville Clark, I kind of get it, but it's just, that's what kind of rubs me the wrong way with this whole movie.
So could you say that? Oh, I'm sorry. No,
go, Juwaan.
I was just gonna say, could you say that Lois Lane kind of digging into the idea of who this superpowered being is? is kind of what faced him to kind of say, because like she was kind of laying it on him to like, you know, I kind of know who you are, and I kind of think we need somebody like you. And it kind of faced him with the idea of like, I have been running from this all my life, right? Like maybe it is time I face it head on. Maybe he didn't have the interests before because he kind of just wanted to see what he could become. And she kind of pushed him to facing, you know, a past he really, I guess, mentally or emotionally wasn't ready to face.
It's interesting that the take that you guys are exploring is very interesting because I think for me, I feel it misses the point of the whole Clark sequence, right? Because one of the things, or at least the angle that they're using here, because we've seen, and it's funny because we're talking about different origins, different take, that we didn't have to do the Krypton thing. And it's funny because when Superman Year One came out, the Frank Miller version of it, one of the things that I love about it is that despite everything that happened throughout his life, Clark was a very happy kid. He had a great childhood. He had a great time at school. You know what I mean? It wasn't, but here they're playing the angle of outcast. They're kind of going for the Superman smashes the Klan angle, where he kind of understands that there's more to him, but he doesn't want to accept it because he's afraid of what that might mean. And the kind of angle that they're pushing here, especially when you have that conversation between Jonathan and Clark about where he was found, that where he comes from, that he comes from the stars, and the fact that he is a guy like, okay, I'm 12 years old, you're telling me all this information, but I just want to pretend to be your son. Like, I just want to be a kid, and I have all this burden and all this truth shoved in my face. He can't. I don't think he chooses to be a hero on a whim. I don't think it's 4 to 5 seconds, right? I think this whole sequence that we have with Clark throughout, it's really all about him understanding where he comes from as a means of shaping his identity. And once he knows who he is, which again is the big celebratory come back home sequence, right? Like he comes to Martha and he goes like, I found him. I know who I am. Like he's his Clark side or his human side has come full circle. He can now make the choice because now he's gotten to that point, or he's presented with an obvious opposition where he has to make a decision of, okay, am I going to do this to save myself? Can I trust Earth with who I am now that I know who I am, what I'm capable of?
I think it also comes down to him believing his father. You know, Jonathan always told him that, you know, when you finally tell everyone this is going to change the world, it's not going to change your life. The entire world will be a different place when you reveal who you are. Right. And people suck and people are going to come after you. And if you look at all the flashbacks, there's a lot of mean humans around, he's getting bullied. He's dealing with people talking about him like he's some kind of freak of nature. Like he doesn't have really much of a reason to doubt his father. You know what I mean? And it seems like that's one of the things that makes Lois so important in this version of the mythology. She's the only other human that he meets outside of his family who knows his secret and then embraces him and lets him know it's okay and all that sort of stuff. And when she embraces him, it's one of the things that gives him the confidence and it's like, all right, fine. You know, so far so good. One human knows and they've accepted. Now let's see what happens. Then we see him win over the army. You know, in the sequence where at the beginning, they're going to target him and all the other Kryptonian invaders. But then by the end, this man is not our enemy, right? Because he saves the one who shoots him. He saves Colonel Hardy. So we're seeing him like slowly win over more and more people. But up until this moment, no, you know, he's never done that before. So yes, he's 33. It took him a while. He's a late bloomer. But at 33, he finally interacts with other humans who see what he is, embrace and love him for what he is, and see what he could be. And I think that's what gives him, you know, the ultimate confidence. But up until that point, it doesn't seem like humanity outside of Martha Kent has been that great to him. You know, and his father did just beat into his head for his whole life that, bro, when you tell people what's up, you're going to
It's-
change all of Earth's history. That's a lot of pressure. You might keep it to yourself for a while, you know?
No, and I'm glad that you mentioned the Lois thing. I'll go straight back to you, Juwaan, because I know you got something. But I want to go on
Isaac,
this
are you
thread.
alive?
I'm alive. I'm just listening to what you're saying, and I'm just where should I chime in, because this is interesting.
I'm just go ahead, Brandon. I'm sorry. I just had to
No,
make
you're
sure.
fine. You're fine. I'm glad that you keep in the pulse. So the whole thing about Lois that I love also with that angle, especially that conversation in the cemetery, right? I like how that is a very important stage, like where Jonathan was buried, like because that's where he goes to like reflect, right? Like we don't have a fortress of solitude yet, so that's kind of like anything close
Forever
to his,
by the time this is over. But yes.
right? Exactly.
Yeah.
We're celebrating that
I'm
he's
sorry,
back.
right? It's the scout ship, and then they crash the scout ship. Homie's got no fortress.
This
And in the
has
next movie,
nothing-
they kill off his alter ego too. Anyway,
Yes.
This has
So-
nothing to do with Henry Cavill. We love you, man. But yeah, just making that clear.
So that whole conversation, with Lois and him, the way that when Lois comes back, right, and tells Perry that she's killing the story, it also presents the fact that she doesn't only accept him for who he was, she understands why this decision weighs so much on him.
and she's willing to protect him. So not only is there not a human attacking him, it's a human finding out about his secret and protecting him. So
Right.
that changes.
And that means
for
a lot to him, right? And then you go to the whole thing, which to me is funny. You jumped one scene, Mario, because you mentioned that when we see his farm boy roots, his dad's gone. So where does he go for counsel? He goes to church.
Yeah.
And but I like the fact that again, as an honest man, again another exemplary good man, right? Or at least, I don't know, maybe this is where his parents used to go in the past, or he just knew because he grew up in Smallville, which, by the way, I find it interesting that it's very possible that everybody in Smallville recognized him when they saw him in the suit.
I feel like
I
that
was
was
thi-
the
yeah.
implication, right? That everybody in Smallville just knows it's like the worst kept secret.
Yeah,
Right.
because even when the mom is talking to Martha, like we saw what he did on the bus. We were there. He rattled off 3 other people. Yeah, Pete Ross did too, and the Fordham boy, and the mayor. I tell you, but like she started rattling off all these different families that were there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure when Homeboy started flying around, they're like, "Oh, it's Clark." All of Smallville knows.
He crashes into the IHOP, and they just kind of look. You can like the extras just look at him for a second. It's like, "Hi, Clark, nice new outfit," and then he flies out.
So no more red blur. So,
No.
so I'm
Wow,
glad
no,
that
just bring Smallville into the continuity. Damn,
we have to. We have to. So he has a conversation with the priest, and then the priest presents the idea like sometimes you have to have a leap of faith, which again, it all builds on the fact that he chooses to try. It goes back to
And
the
he
day that
does it up to that point. He doesn't trust humans to that point because of everything. So that is a pivotal moment. He needs to have that leap of faith.
Right. So that's why when you take the stance, or at least when people take the stance of, oh, he just became Superman like that, I was like, no, there's a lot of gears going around in his mind to the point that he makes that decision, especially with this iteration of the presentation of the character. So, which is why I respect it a lot and enjoy it. Isaac, you said you found a lot. Wait, Juwaan, you had something to say. Hopefully you didn't.
Oh
forget.
no. I was just adding to what you guys are saying. I was saying part of what made his decision so hard and his journey so hard is one thing we don't talk about enough is a lot of this, not on purpose, but a lot of the self-doubt his dad put on him. I mean, it kind of made him kind of feel like, will I ever make the right decision? Right? Like whatever I choose,
Like he saved
is that
the
right
lives
decision?
on the school bus. Yeah. And
Right.
Jonathan's like, well, maybe you should have let them drown. Well, if that wasn't clearly the right decision, then what is, Dad? I can't make any choices ever again. I saved a school bus of kids, and I'm getting lectured.
Not just a school
I ain't
bus,
leaving the
his
house
classmates, his friends are on that bus.
Somewhere in heaven,
Kevin's like,
his
I don't
dad was
know.
looking
like
down. His dad was
Yeah.
looking down at the city like, Shouldn't have saved him, man. You shouldn't have. Should have just let Zod do what he was doing, man. Should have.
No,
I
but
taught you
As
better
he's
than
dying, as he's dying in Batman versus Superman, he gets a flashback and this is Jonathan going, "Told you,
he's still stuck in wood.
that.
shouldn't have bothered. I told you it was going to be a bad idea. You've been
That's
here
this.
a few months and now you're dead. You had 33 years. Fine. You tell people who you are, you're dead a few months later."
One day changed everything.
All it takes.
I tried to
is
warn
one
you, kid.
day.
This
trying to
joke
warn you, kid.
feels like something that how it should have ended would have implemented.
Wow.
No, but, like,
kind of surprised that
honest-
it didn't.
Honestly, that's one of my biggest frustrations. Like, I feel like they laid it on really thick with Pa Kent. Like, that might have been a bit much, saying, yeah, maybe you should have let your classmates die. Clark, we're not gonna just let the dog die. I'm gonna get the dog and die in a tornado. Those are the moments where I'm like, this is why I feel like Clark is not a character in this movie, because yes, it comes down to him having to finally make his own decision in the end. But like throughout the entire film, it's constantly other characters telling him what to do, and he just goes along with it. Like, what would have the repercussions have been? Okay, I see Brandon's gearing up to light into me. I understand. But like, that's part of my issue, is that we don't get into Clark's head. And you can say he's struggling internally with all of this like pressure. But I want to have him have a conversation with his mother about his father's death, instead of just kind of glossing over that, and why he's saving these men on that oil rig, and then he saves Lois. It's like he's clearly he just used heat vision to save Lois. He's clearly using his powers to help people in this like vigilante-esque way. So he kind of already did make that decision that, yeah, if people are in trouble, I'm not going to stop helping them. So it's kind of weird that we keep having him question if he should do it, when throughout the movie we make him do it.
To be fair, I kind of view that kind of like the moment right after Order 66, right, where you kind of like, all Jedi are either dead or they're gone, right? A few Jedi would step in and save people, but they're not going to fully come out as a Jedi, right? This is the worst possible time to do that. I'll help you from the shadows, but I'm not fully outing myself to make myself a target.
Like, for example, we see that with Obi-Wan and Ahsoka, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to hear Clark say why he's doing it that way.
Okay. I won't argue that. Yeah,
that's my problem with the film in general, is that Clark doesn't feel like a character in his own movie. It feels like Lois Lane is the driving force of the story, when the driving force of the story should be Kal-El.
Yeah.
So here's why I got all excited. What I like about the conversations within Jonathan Kent, Jor-El, and all that stuff is because it all plays down to the whole nature against nurture thing, right? Mm-hmm. And you have this overprotective but visionary nurturing Pa Kent for whatever reason, right? Nurturing him to be this person that, nurturing with the fear and the imminence of that whenever he declares himself to the world, right? It's going to change everything, good, bad, whatever it is, right? But the one thing that's undeniable, which is, again, I think part of the point of all the flashbacks, is that Clark's nature is to do the right thing. It's built into him.
He's about to die.
Yeah, it's built into him. He can't not do the right thing. And the choice is not whether or not he's going to save people. The choice is, am I going to declare myself to the world that I exist? So it's not that he's going to stop helping people, or like, because that's what he's been doing all this time, and you're right. So the choice really is, am I going to declare myself? Because you got to think, maybe he would have declared himself differently or in a different period of time if it wasn't because of Zod reappearance, right? Like we've seen in different moments, like, for example, I go back to the adventures of Lois and Clark, right? The rocket scene, or in the premiere episode of that series, when Dean Cain makes the decision, his mom makes him the suit, and he says, "Okay, I'm going to do this," and he chooses to become Superman, right? But and then you have, of course, Jonathan Kent doing all this, but one of the things that allows him to make that choice, or it helps him choose to take the leap of faith also, is that when he finally meets his biological father, all he does is something that Pa Kent didn't do. He tells you, you're here to inspire. You can be a force for good. You can be a guiding light. And it's funny because when we go back to Krypton, he was trying to be that for Krypton and everybody just denied him. But he couldn't be. So he's saying you have the opportunity to be hope, to be a symbol, which is something that he never viewed himself before because of how Pa Kent. So you have that combined with his nature of doing the right thing, and you get to the choice where he chooses to be Superman or chooses to out himself, you know? And so I don't think he will ever stop trying to save people. I think the whole choice thing is whether or not he's going to let everybody know that he exists.
But this goes back to my issue of not understanding Clark as a person, right? Because you're saying it's in his nature. Why? If his parents throughout his entire life tell him one thing, why? And those are the conversations I think are more interesting than spending 20 minutes on Krypton.
True.
Having more time with him talking to his parents about it instead of, son, you should do this. Are you sure? Yes. Okay. That's just kind of it, you know?
I remember verbatim when I was leaving the theater the first time, I was saying, like, if they would have just shaved like 15 minutes off all the action at the end and thrown that into further character development, I think we'd have like a perfect movie here. But then, I don't know if you would go that far, Mike, because it's like you liked a lot of it. But I'm with you. Like, shave off some of the action, put that time into developing our main character a little more, and voila.
I took it more so as I think you guys are absolutely right, but I think my times watching it, I took it more so as like Clark is just this blank canvas that he's allowing everybody he encounters in life to paint for him. So like he's never really had a chance to kind of structure his own life. It's really everybody else, whether it was his birth parents, his adopted parents, Lois. We learned Batman later on. It just seems like everybody structured him. And that was the biggest flaw I think they had of the character, is that at some point the guy has to just say, I am stronger than all of you. I make the decisions. like this is what I wanted to do. right.
And I think that's what we see once he puts on the suit. But you all have valid points. Isaac, what you got?
Yeah, I was going to say the sort of like same thing, because it's sort of like this movie is a lot about focusing on the whole how to raise different views of how to raise a child, nature versus nurture, and they hammering him, which just makes him conflicted in what he is supposed to do, which makes him, like Juwaan said, a blank state. And then here comes the moment where he is, no, this is I need to do this kind of thing. You could have explored it a little better. I can agree on that one.
Yeah.
But I can. I think it's clear to why they made Clark as they did, because this movie is all about what if a supernatural. I wouldn't say supernatural, but essentially
what if a
god,
godlike being?
Yeah. And that's why it's a better way to sort of like putting a focus on Lois Lane, since she is the one that essentially becomes his first real contact with the humankind outside of his adopted parents, kind of deal, because her being the one that truly makes him going into the step of being truly Superman. Yes, he has been vigilantes, but he is going full Superman thanks to her talking with him as a kind of deal. And I'm actually gonna defend the maybe scene because of one reason. Pa Kent in this movie is extremely protective of Clark. He is exceptionally that. And for him to say that it was wrong, it would be it would sort of be like off the characters kind of deal, and that's why also it made sense that he allowed himself to die about the tornado. He didn't want to risk Clark to reveal himself. Don't take any chances whatsoever. So, but he knew that, but at the same time, he knew why Clark saved those kids, and he would probably done the same. I would even so far say that he would probably done the same thing if he were in his scenario, for what we know. That's why he's so conflicted and saying maybe, because he don't want his son to get exposed, but he can he won't he don't feel see it it's a bad thing to save people. Kind of, does that make any sense?
No,
Yeah,
I mean it does, but I think like I love that scene of the sacrifice. But where I think as a writer you kind of made that whole thing confusing is that not only did you take his ability to make his own decisions away, I think you never really thought about what that would do to him. The fact that he has to live with that, right? Like he has to live with losing you and knowing that he could have saved you very easily.
Or
right?
let the dog die. I'm sorry. I have a dog. I love Bailey. But if it comes down to between her and my dad, I'm choosing my dad. You know?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Somewhere that dog is just like, oh, all right.
That's why before Brandon was like, oh yeah, he can't help himself. He always has to help and save people. And I'm like, unless it's his dad. But yeah.
And then he's like,
he's waving
No,
off.
here's the
I'm
thing.
ignoring that. I'm flying right through there. I'm sorry. That's why that scene doesn't work for me. Like we could have come up with a better way to communicate that idea, but it's like, really?
But then
Here's
there's
the
a
thing,
sense of
I-
trust that he has.
No, I'm sorry. I don't trust my dad enough to just let him die. I'm sorry.
No.
Juwan's right though. He never thought about the PTSD of that
Right,
situation.
right.
too.
That's
Right.
really why he doesn't become Superman after that. It's like, in my notes here, it's like, does Clark not become Superman because he's listening to his father, or is he like doing it as a way to honor him in a way? It's like his dying wish was for me to not do this thing. So clearly, I can never be.
That's the
Superman.
thing. That's not the wish, though. The wish is to hold on until the right moment, until he was
you're
ready.
until you know.
Until
can I say something, Brandon?
Go.
I think what would have been a better journey is if he had to realize at some point it's time to stop listening to dad, right? And start to kind of carve out my own. Because they let that even go into BVS of him still listening to his dad that charted him on a course that maybe lost a lot of lives because he did not make the decision. Obviously, he wanted to, which was be a hero. So I thought that would have been a better journey, was for him to finally face his dad and say,
Let him
thank
be
you for
his
everything,
own person.
but yeah, I'm my own man now. I'm 40 at this fucking point, right?
I enjoy Batman v Superman, but yes, I agree that they should have stopped with that part in that movie.
It's
There's
hard
a lot
for.
that shouldn't have happened in that movie,
There's a
including
lot.
that movie.
Yeah, boy.
Will I be invited back when you guys do the chatter after for BBS? Because there'll be a lot to say there.
Yes.
Yes.
We got it. It's their 85th anniversary next year. We've got to do Batman versus Superman, right? Come on.
Yeah.
It needs to happen.
The Ultimate Edition, and please, because the theatrical is not that
It
good.
makes no difference. They're both
Yeah,
terrible.
it makes more. It makes more. It's
About
better.
Man of Steel.
About Man of
yeah.
Steel. Yes.
So I'm glad that we all have very different takes on this, because again, this is one of the biggest things that occurred at the movie's release, right? It was very divisive.
I feel like I'm poisoning the well because everybody started saying that they enjoyed this movie.
No,
Like,
no.
Slowly, the conversation
love
is
it.
getting
I am
soured and
convinced.
soured.
No,
I
I am
love it.
convinced
still
that
love
this
it.
film is great. And
still
it,
love
and
it.
it hits.
I'm still loving it.
Yeah,
Listen,
it
I
hits all the
think
right
it's
notes.
great with its issues, but yes.
Yes.
It's flawed. Yeah, no arguments there.
But you know what's not flawed?
Superman 2.
The first flight sequence.
Yes.
Yes.
That is one of the most beautiful, inspiring, well-scored superhero sequences I've ever seen in my life. And what I love about it is it's not just the Jor-El narration, right, that builds up the scene, but it's the fact that for the first time in his whole life, this is the first time that we see Clark having fun with who he is and what he can do. Right? Um, Again, the fact that he's smiling as he's flying across the world and shifting the sonic booms, the water, he's going through different landscapes. It's just great. But also the build up to that where he's trying, you're hearing the thing, right? When he actually falls and fails, and then you have the narration, they will stumble and they will fall. But again, in my head, I'm like, just like you did just now, which goes back to the human side of Clark, right? But eventually they'll meet with you in the sun, which is like, hey, we recognize that humans are flawed. We recognize that you may see yourself superior to them, or you can do things better than them. But the idea is that you can be an inspiration, and hopefully most of them will meet you in the sun, which is what I liked what you mentioned about Mario. What you mentioned, Mario, is the idea that little by little, he opens the eyes of a lot of humans around him. They kind of start to see that, okay, like his light is shining on them, and and it grows and grows. So you can see a little bit of all those little pieces, which is one of the best things of the film, because it's like those are the few scenes or the few through lines in the film where the movie fulfills the promise that it makes in the beginning, right? Or fulfills the promise that it was presented for the character. When you guys saw that first sequence for the first time, how did you feel? Mike?
Isaac, what do you think? Okay.
He'll tell you in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
No, that's a joke that the audience won't understand. Yeah, good one. But no,
5 minutes.
this it's a great scene. It's one of those things where I feel like it's a moment that should have already happened though for Clark's journey, because is he just now realizing he can fly? Is that what's happening really here? Or is this him just now embracing being Superman? Like, how do you interpret that scene? Because I feel like
first flight.
Yeah,
That's the first flight.
Well, there's no Superman yet. Remember, he doesn't have the name that's given to
suit,
him.
Though
doesn't have a suit.
He has a suit, not the Superman suit. Remember, that's the royal attire of the House of El.
Right.
Everybody has a suit like that. It just, we know it as a Superman suit.
Sure. The scene's fine. Move on. Somebody else go.
When I saw that, I thought this is why Snyder was hired, and I was grateful in that moment, because I'm like, since he could get the visuals, he could make it look grandiose and mythic and like just rip it from the page and make it look, unbelievable. So I remember like seeing how good it looked, and kind of strapping myself in for the fact that like Superman movies are going to look great from now on. I grew up on the Reeve things, and with the effects being kind of antiquated, and even in Superman Returns, I thought the flying looked kind of bogus, and there was a lot of CG Brandon and not a lot of good wire work. And I just in general, I was very let down by the flying in Superman Returns. So looking at First Flight, I'm like, oh no, what they can do nowadays with Superman, we're going to have like some visual feasts in this and in the sequels. So I was just kind of taking it all in, what we can do nowadays, back then, 9 years ago.
Isaac.
I mean, it's what makes this scene good, or should I say even great in my book, is two things. The whole, although I think it's great in general, is the whole they will join in the sun, because it's a bit symbolic about him failing and then going, then manage to fly without the issues. But also the score, and I think Hans Zimmer nailed it with that one. It's a theme for today's for modern day Superman, I dare argue. It tries to be its own thing, and without being too scared to sort of like how we talked about earlier, emulate the Donner movies, because a lot of other movies would easily kind of like, how should I put it? Oh, I'm just constantly using this here also, but I digress. But and it's the whole reaction through him. I would honestly say that this is probably my favorite scene in the movie. Actually,
Nice. Nice.
or at least one of my favorite.
So
Yeah.
I just want to jump back in right quick. The line that Jor-El says, right? You'll give the people of Earth an ideal to strive towards. And I think that perfectly captures everything Superman is supposed to be, right? But again, it just kind of harkens back to my main issue of why. Why does this Clark, why will he give the people on Earth an ideal to strive towards? Because I don't know who he is, and clearly he doesn't know who he is. So that's kind of just a weird thing to say about this version of Superman, where I'm wondering, like, okay, why do I want to be like this guy? Why should people follow this guy's lead? I kind of wish, again, we spent more time developing Clark as a person and understanding his personality, and like, he does want to help people. He is a good leader. Like, you can even there's a moment in this film on Smallville. He has like a Kansas City Royals shirt. Tell him that he's the leader of his baseball team or something. Like, give me an idea on why people should follow this guy's lead. That's my takeaway from that scene, where it's like, that's a great line for Superman. I don't know if that's a great line for this interpretation of Superman at this point in the story, is where I was coming from.
Interesting.
It seems to be more just like a destiny thing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like you are fated to do this. But I see what you mean, though, that like we haven't really been shown a Clark that seems to have this great ability to inspire others and bring hope to others. Maybe had there been like a scene or something prior to that where we can see, like, oh, you know what? He's a real, like, he's a leader of man. He may be keeping a quiet, but he instills confidence and hope and faith and love in those around him. So yeah, of course, one day if he could ever broadcast that on a larger scale, he's going to inspire the world. But up until now, we've just seen him do a bunch of cool stuff and then go hiding afterward. So I kind of see what you mean.
I just took it more so as like those parents that tell their kids they could be a president, and it's like,
You could be
oh,
within
no,
the
never
world.
believe it. Right? Like, no, your kid can't. But all right,
I
whatever,
love
guess
the
it's a good thing.
idea. That's amazing. The idea that Jor-El is just gassing his head up because that's his son, and he doesn't.
He's
When
like,
it's
well, what
over,
else
he's
am I
like,
supposed to say?
yeah. When it's over, he looks at Laura. I don't know. What am I going to tell him? No, you're going to be a loser.
The
She's
world's
like,
gonna
why did you
like
tell
the
me
rest
that?
of
He's
us.
like, I didn't know what else to say. I thought it sounded cool. I don't know.
The billionaire nut down the street is gonna kill you. Is gonna try and kill you, and the second nut down in the other city is gonna try and kill you. That's what's gonna happen.
But see, this
Wow.
is why people tell people you can't just tell your kids they can be anything. You gotta be honest. No, the flight scene for me was really cool. To me, that's what I always look forward to in superhero movies. Those oh shit moments where I feel like, now's the time. They know who they are. That was that for me. You know, that was that for me. So I thought it was dope.
I like the touch of the anti-gravity, right? Where you see the dust start to rise before
Yeah,
it takes off, and it's like,
That's awesome.
that's a very cool way to reinterpret the power of flight for Superman. It's really dope.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Awesome. So, moving on with the film, let's talk about the fight in Smallville. And I think with those are the kind of things we can move past on towards the end, because not a lot of story happens. It's just action throughout, pretty much. Mike, calm down.
No, I'm just like, the last 45 minutes is nothing but an action scene, man.
I get it. Now,
So this should be the quickest part we discussed, right?
I
Probably.
like the part where he punched him. That was cool. Let's move on.
Now, those that know of Superman and know of the mythology know that Krypton has a very particular martial arts style. And did you guys notice that how not only because she's a warrior, but when whatever her name is, Feora. was fight, like Henry couldn't really put a hand on her because he was just a superior martial artist. Not just because of the raw power. And
Well, remember,
actually,
they're the warriors of Krypton, right? So
Right.
he shouldn't have been close to anybody here.
True, but then you go back to the Krypton scene,
Yeah.
and you can see that it's very possible that Jor-El, apart from the fact that he was Cinderella Man, Jor-El probably knows that martial arts too. And do you guys want to see that in the future? The fact that it's not just Superman just throwing punches, but that he actually was able to learn the fighting style of Krypton.
No, because that's what I love separates him from everybody else in the Justice League. Like Wonder Woman is a trained fighter. Batman is a trained fighter. I like the idea that Superman's just like, I will punch you so hard, your head will explode. Like, that's really all I got. I don't really have anything else. Like, you can't be a skilled fighter and freeze breath and laser beams and fly so fast you can change time. Like, you can't have all these abilities.
He's got to have some limit. Yeah. If he's also got a black belt, that's what are we doing here?
Or else you become Goku.
Doesn't
From
When do
Dragon
we
Ball.
ever
have
need a
enough?
Justice League if he could do all these things? Like,
Come
we
on,
just need
Brandon,
him. That's
doesn't-
it.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah.
Come
Or
on.
else,
It
like I
he-
said,
he doesn't
you
have
become
enough.
Son Goku.
No, I mean, I don't mind the idea of Superman being able to throw hands. Only when he's fighting like Darkseid or something. Like that's the thing. Like once you introduce an extra skill, I don't think martial arts really matters that much anymore. Because if one punch, he's knocking most people out anyway. But now if he's actually has to square up and fight somebody on his level. I'm kind of okay with that. That's not a big deal, especially if he is friends with Diana and Bruce. They probably should teach him a couple moves, even if it's not like the Kryptonian fighting style.
I don't know how comfortable I am seeing Batman uses. I'm not Batman. I'm sorry. Superman uses legs. Like if he's kicking motherfuckers, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. Like,
Now let me change the argument a little bit. Here's why I like the whole if they go towards that, because not only that, because Jor-El wasn't just throwing punches. He was doing grapples and stuff and a bunch of other stuff.
Now, see, that's the thing that scares me. Can you imagine getting grappled by Superman? Just try to tap out.
Now,
I'm out of here.
Now, the reason I bring this up is because, for example, one of the best examples of knowing how to fight was the opening scene in Avengers Infinity War when Thanos kicks Hulk's ass. You got two very superpowered beings. Hulk could probably punch Thanos and knock him out, but because Thanos understood how to fight, he was able to take the beast down, right? To the point that he was so scared that Bruce Banner was stuck in the iron bulk Hulkbuster armor, So, and everybody was lied to in the trailers. So, I like the idea because when you think about it, if Kara is older, what if she knows how to do it? And one of the things that's always been shown about Kara in the comics is that Kara is kind of stronger than Kal-El, or can be. And maybe that's one of the reasons she can have something up on Henry. Like Henry's the experienced, Kal-El is the experienced one, so he mentors. But then you have Supergirl with all this additional skill. I don't know.
We find out, like in her alter ego, she's running a Cobra Kai.
right. Yes. Right.
Yeah.
She's with Ralph
Terry
Macchio.
Silver, man. Terry Silver.
I'll say this: if Kara can utilize different fighting techniques, I'm fine with that because what it can do is an audience that's not familiar with Superman and Supergirl, that gives them a better insight on how different the two of them are. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like she could do different things, like, fighting, actual fighting, not just throwing a fist. But to me, it's, again, I can never picture Superman using his legs. like I can't, man. I can't.
His leg is everything.
It's just a weird line to draw, man.
It's just so weird
But I
to me.
agree with it.
It's so weird.
It's unnatural. If his knee
It's
goes
weird.
to a 90-degree angle, what is he doing? Why?
That's what I'm saying. Like, wait, what? Like, come on, man. I don't know. It's just weird to me. It's weird.
I've got a question. I've got a question.
You're welcome.
Thanks for screwing this up in the edit, Isaac. I appreciate it. No, but I've got a question for you guys. Have you seen the animated movie, Superman, Batman, Apocalypse?
Yes.
So good.
Yes.
Yeah.
So good.
Do we want to just do that with Kara and have her train with Wonder Woman in Themyscira instead of her knowing the Kryptonian martial arts? She just learns how to fight like an Amazon.
I'm good with that.
Sure.
But
Even though it was very
I just want more
confusing.
Kryptonian lore.
It was very
I got
confusing in that animated movie because when she ended up fighting Clark at the end, she was just using her hands. Like, there were no actual fighting moves utilized. So it's like, well, did you forget what you learned, or were we supposed to not actually pay attention to that?
It had to happen for the narrative, Juwaan. For the narrative.
As long as we can stay even kill on that phrase when it comes to this movie, Mike, I'm fine. I'm with you. I can agree. But yeah, no, like I said, Superman kicking. Oof.
The kicks. So
I can't. My brain can't even imagine it now. Like, I'm just trying to imagine.
Right?
Actually,
it's just like,
there
it's not
is
computed.
one kick. There is one kick committed to celluloid, and it's hideous. When Superman, I think it's in Superman 4, at some point on the moon, he does this like slow motion, awkward, and he kicks him, and Nuclear Man floats away gently. But like, it's awkward because like he doesn't raise his leg. It's like his leg was bent and he just straightened it, you know. And anyway, it was
Nuclear Man for Man of Steel 2, baby.
Look, I'll accept it if you tell me his one kick is the Sweet Chin Music. I'll accept it then, because then that's like, yeah, that's cinema.
So
but if it's not that,
yes.
I don't want it.
So Man of Steel.
Does he have to do the thing also? Like,
Yes, he has to go full Shawn Michaels. Yes.
Jeez.
So now, I like the scene in Smallville. I think the more important. Yeah, that's where we're. I'm trying to steer the ship.
Brought to you by IHOP. Okay, go ahead.
And Sears.
And 7-Eleven.
Nice to know that Smallville has all the big stores and restaurants, right?
Right. No, I love the fact that Martha Kent works at Sears. I found that very particular. So.
I mean, she sears through the movie, so.
Now, I was a little disappointed. Well, I do find a little disappointing. This is the one thing. It's not a big thing, but it's the only thing that I found disappointing of the whole Smallville fight sequence.
Yeah.
The one, you can't
That he didn't have
frighten my
storage?
mother.
Oh.
You can't frighten my mother. Like, that was a bit much. But the fact that we didn't get the promotional still in his battle with Feora. If you guys remember, the first still that we ever got of Henry Cavill Superman was
him
Superman.
against the bank vault?
Yes. Mm-hmm. So we kind of get a glimpse of it in the mode, but I would have loved just seeing that as part of the sequence, because that still, that was just great. Do you remember when that came out, Mario?
It's
yeah,
great.
no. The first official look was quite a thing, and I remember everyone having to try to analyze because it was so shrouded in darkness in his midsection that people were like, "I think I see red. I think he's got underwear." Like, I remember this is the kind of stuff that we would argue about on Superman message boards.
What is it?
Do
What
you
is it?
see
Blue
the red
tights?
Yeah. Do you see the red shorts? I think it's there. No. See, it's a slightly different dark.
Those conversations were great because then you'd have people like increase the brightness on the photo, be like right there, and it's like there's nothing there. Those are the fun times.
Is he naked?
Superman fans have been starving for like 3 decades now.
Yes, we have, and now we're finally about to eat well. Finally.
Now,
about time.
There's a bunch of action. They got this crazy. By the way, those that don't know, the final act with the terraforming, or at least the ship design, it comes right off the pages of the first book of Earth 1. So if you guys want to read Superman Earth 1, that's where that ship comes from, and that whole sequence of destroying Metropolis.
Link in the description.
Yeah. I have a question, which I think is the more pertinent point of discussion, especially towards the final act of the movie. By the time we get to the Sod battle, because this is something that I was just thinking. Every time I watch the film, because it was such a huge point of controversy, it's like, no, he didn't save anybody. He didn't appear that he cared about the destruction and all that, which I do agree, and I might sound heartless with what I'm about to say, but when I got to that scene this time, and I see the desolate center of Metropolis, right after the Phantom Zone singularity occurs and the entire ship goes into nothingness, everything's desolate, or at least in that section. and then the battle starts. You have two gods fighting, right? Did Kal-El really have a chance to take the fight elsewhere?
Nope.
With all the destruction that was already there?
Nope.
Yes, he did
No.
at some point.
We went from
No.
Smallville into
They
Metropolis.
were in
to,
outer
like, yeah,
space for a
we were in
little while. They could have ended up someplace else after space, like anywhere else on Earth.
True. Now, Zod was the one that took him back down to Metropolis, and then he was able to turn him back. So the fight, because at this point, remember, Zod started the fight, and he was mostly in control throughout the whole thing. So he's just trying to dodge this guy. And yes, I do see that he was. I do see all the arguments of lack of care are completely valid. The whole jumping over the LexCorp truck, the explosion, all the cars falling down. There's probably a lot of people there, and maybe another dog. Or no, the dog survives because all the dogs survive in this movie.
Are all the dogs from Krypton? Are they all just like a bunch of cryptos on Earth? Is that why they are invincible?
Might be.
Probably. But he's trying to stop this monster, but he's not giving a chance to breathe to do anything else. So he's being overpowered consistently, and he's trying to take back the fight. Mm-hmm. So did he really have the opportunity to have a conversation? Let's take like what he did with Nuclear Man in Superman 4, because I think that was a conversation, right? Or did they actually end up in the moon? I don't remember.
I don't remember how they ended up on the moon.
We choose not to remember Superman 4, so it's totally understandable. But I feel like a lot of that, like, you're not necessarily wrong, Brandon, but also that just comes from what we're Goyer and Snyder trying to accomplish here, right? Because you could have just written a fight where that doesn't happen and he's not put in that situation type of thing. Because you get to the point where it's like, okay, this was technically what every fight Superman's in would ever look like, right? Unless he does learn martial arts and he's able to can overpower Zod. So it's like you didn't necessarily have to frame it or write it that way. And for me, I'm kind of sitting here like the entire point of this entire movie, you're denying me the thing I paid to see. I want to see Superman be Superman. And I get it's an origin story and you want to build to that point, but you get to the end of this fight and you're like, well, Paul was right. As soon as Zod found out Clark was here and the world found out about Superman, look what happened to Metropolis. And so it doesn't justify the idea of becoming Superman. So
I'm glad you said that though. Hang on, let's analyze that, Mike. Because what is Superman being Superman? Is it Superman beating up a villain? Or is it Superman saving people? What makes Superman Superman?
Well, that's why I think there could have been a balance. But to me, I thought it was important.
That last act.
Well, no. I'm saying
the scenario.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. To Mike's point, I think you could have found a balance. But to me, if you left out the idea of destruction, I wouldn't have liked it because the guy just had his first ever fight, right? So it's like the idea that he's being thrown through buildings and can't necessarily control a lot of what's happening right away. I buy, but I also would have liked somewhere in those fights where Zod's like laser beaming a building. You see Superman tried his best to like fly through and get everybody out. Like you could have done a balance of that. Yeah. But to say that he had his first big fight and there's no destruction,
but we don't get one close up of Superman in the third act where he seems to be like looking around at what the hell going on and noticing that there's pedestrians and that there's people. Like, think about it. In the "you can't threaten my mother" thing that Brandon just brought up, he spears Zod like through a building, through like a train, and through a gas station that explodes. Right in that moment, he could have killed a few people, and that would have been on Clark. He's the one who speared Zod. And like coming straight out of that, as he gets up, you have him look around and realize, oh crap, we're on Main Street. I gotta figure out like how to do that again. But you never see that thought process. You never see him take in the fact that, oh, this thing I just did might have just killed Farmer Joe. It never seems to occur to him ever.
That's why to me, like as a character, Superman is interesting, right? Because like you said, Mara, his job isn't necessarily to beat up the bad guys. That's what I read and watch Batman for. Superman is the beacon of help, the person to help save people. And I think of like the first Spider-Man movie, right, where the civilians get behind Spider-Man. So you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us. It's like that's the type of energy I want from a Superman story, where he's doing his best to stop collateral damage. And it can. I agree, Juwaan. It still will happen. Zod is a better fighter than him, and I even love
that'll force his hand for where he has to kill Zod. It would work better like that.
Right,
exactly.
I completely agree. That's why I'm saying they could have found a way to better balance it. But as we saw where this story progressed, that was a cognitive decision to make Superman inflict all of that chaos, right? So it kind of ensues this idea of, are you here to help us? Or are you here to harm us? And as though he may feel as though, well, clearly I'm here to help you. They're like, well, I just lost my entire family in that building you brought down yesterday. Yeah. So I'm like, it was clearly their narrative going forward. But again, it was from a writer I solely believe wanted to do a Batman movie that ended up doing a Superman movie and really did not have the full grasp on what he wanted Superman to be.
It's
and
one of those...
Sorry, go ahead. I'm just real quick, because the unintended consequence of that conflict that you're mentioning, Juwaan, of the people within that world who are going to see him as a savior and the people who are going to see him as the reason that all this happened. The unintended consequence was that bled over into real life. People were very divisive on the film. Some people saw the genuine hero in there who was trying his best on his first day at the office. And other people saw this guy was really kind of reckless and not trying his best and not saving lives and was kind of rash and dumb at times. So it's like, it's one thing to create that conversation within the world of the movie. But it ended up in his execution of the story. It ended up creating that after the fact amongst the audiences, and that became a problem for the movie.
It becomes, and I know I've said this a million times already, not having that connection to Clark and understanding his connection to humanity, right? Because if he makes the statement, Krypton had its chance, and even in BVS, he says, "This is my world," right? And it's like I never really grasp that, and this kind of leads into that idea of he doesn't really make much attempt to save Smallville from that destruction or save Metropolis from that destruction, whereas if we planted those seeds earlier in the story, if we see him trying and failing, I at least can understand that, but we don't even see that happen here, which makes the movie, again, in parts it's brilliant, in scenes it's brilliant, but as a whole nothing ever comes together for me.
Isaac, your thoughts on the whole debacle?
I mean, I don't really know where to put in, because if I were to listen to this podcast instead of being in the recording, I might as well have prepared a popcorn bag before or listening to it if I knew the context of it. But I'm with the genre or something like on all this, because sort of like how I talked with about Pa Kent being off character. If he hadn't said that maybe line, it would have felt weird if there wouldn't be any destruction throughout the third act against Zod. Because what?
No, it's for the audience.
Mario.
For the audio only listeners listening on the Spotify, Mario just had Superman kicking across the screen, and it's the creepiest thing ever. Superman can't kick. We got it. He can't kick.
And the craziest thing, he's like he's kind of doing the Liu Kang.
Exactly.
And he did it again.
Yeah.
All right, keep going.
It's okay. And I was just listening, watching it on my window, so I didn't watch the screen. That's why I reacted the way I did.
Yeah.
But anyway, and it would be off, sort of like off character if there weren't any destruction in terms of the fight against Zod, because these are two gods fighting each other, where one of them doesn't really care what happens to Earth. He wants to destroy it all, so of course he's going to cause mass destruction, kind of deal. But here comes a deal of people, like you said, felt that there were need of more scenes of him saving people, which I can totally understand. But at the same time, you can make an argument of he's new at the job, he doesn't know his powers 100%, so he is doing mentally. I'm focusing all on him because I don't know how to handle 7 stuff at the same time, kind of deal. Considering this is not 10 years in the job Superman kind of deal, then I would get. Then it would be extremely questionable why he doesn't save the civilians on top of the whole destruction. So, but also, as sort of like a side note, I don't know if you guys have noticed that one, which always gives me a chuckle, but it's when Zod is doing its whole Sengoku thing and losing his armor and becomes faster. You see him fly. You see crashing on the days X days before prior accident, and it removes from that one when it got hit by it, and it caused another a new accident again. So it resetted that clock, which almost always makes me chuckle. I'm not gonna lie.
I'm gonna say yes, Isaac. Did you guys catch that? Like when they go to the
days
construction
without
zone.
incident.
Yeah.
Crash with a sign, and it goes. It has like 100 and something, and then it ends at 0.
Zero.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's funny that it's probably the movie commentating on itself. And Superman, you're having a bad day at work. You're not doing your job. So you're not preventing accidents. All of you guys, they're all valid points because, and one of the things that I enjoy, and I'm gonna go back to the Fanboy podcast. I don't know, Mara, you're here, right? But one of the biggest arguments that I find the most legitimate, right, is that the year before Man of Steel, we saw the Avengers evacuate and save the people of New York. And none of them are Superman.
Did they?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
There's constant
a lot
scenes.
of in that third act, you see the cops working it, and you see the heroes working with the cops.
Okay. Cap even says, "Hey, evacuate this building, do this and that."
Right,
and then,
right. The center focus was we got to evacuate and save as many people as we can while
and you
we
hear the
figure
heroes
out.
talking about it too. Yeah,
Yeah.
trying to limit the damage. We have to keep the Chitauri to just within this range. And
there was like 7 of them and all of New York's cops. There's a lot of people to help out clearing that stuff.
But none of them are Superman. I would say 7 Avengers don't equal Superman.
2 of them do. Come on, Mike. Be fair. Hulk and Thor.
No.
Come on.
But here's the point. Now,
Superman knocked out Hulk in a comic book once, man. Like one shot.
We don't remember that. What are you talking about?
We do not acknowledge that.
Now, to the point here, I'm going to make a clear statement here. I love the finale just because of the emotion between Cavill and between Superman and Zod.
Basically, it's Cavill. There's no Superman here, but go on.
Wow. So damn, nail in the coffin. But I do love the whole sequence because to me, I would never expected to see such a visually stunning Superman fight in flight. You know what I mean? Like the whole fight sequence is just phenomenal. Like one of my favorite takes is there's just one take where they're going through buildings after he punches 3 times Zod. He stops and the whole camera goes around him. You guys remember the scene? Yep. And you can see the buildings and then Zod just catches up. Like visually it's just stunning. So I fall in love with that. But
I was gonna say that's a great way to frame it, right? Because
Yeah.
so much of superhero movies in Hollywood, they frame super speed in slow motion, and I kind of hate it. And it's like, no, we're just letting the fast guys be fast, and the camera's trying to keep up with them, which I thought was a really cool way.
Which again
filming
goes
it.
back to the cinematography and Zack Snyder's direction. From the beginning of the Krypton scene, I keep going back. That whole zoom in and zoom in again that he does constantly through the film in different scenes. I like how that plays into the whole zoom in feature and power that Clark has of being able to see things a lot closer than what they are. So I like how it plays into the story and it plays into our vision. Like he's trying to frame it where we can see how he sees as opposed to how everybody else is seeing this, right? It's a nice mixture and touch. But I can't deny that it is a scene that's very problematic. Sequence is very problematic because it does brings all these issues and creates all these arguments. Now, it is the last bit of the film because, of course, we all knew he was going to end up in the Daily Planet. I do enjoy that presentation when he goes in. That whole conversation with his mother about, well, I got to find a job where I can keep my ear to the ground and nobody will question when I get into trouble. Like, that whole thing is awesome. But I think from this whole debacle in the third act and into that scene, let's talk about the future. Henry Cavill's back.
Yes.
And of course, Superman is back. The Superman that I've grown to love. We never got a chance to really see Clark be Clark in a lot of instances, in valid ways that Mike has surely pointed out multiple times throughout this pod.
Oh, I just have one more thing. How does he get to work at one of the biggest newspaper companies in the world without going to school for journalism?
Lois
We don't know that he
probably
didn't.
Lois Lane.
Well,
Lois
no.
put
on,
in a
Mike.
good word, bro.
Well,
Yeah,
here's the
Come on,
thing.
that's so obvious.
Well,
That's not, as somebody
There's-
who is a writer, that is not how that works. I'm sorry.
right.
Oh no, not how it works, but
No,
that's
Mike-
exactly what they did.
No, but then, and I'm glad that Mike brought out, he actually brings a very good point because a lot of the basis literature that we have of Clark Kent, he does go to school for journalism or he works as a writer or a freelancer for a lot of different places around the world. Because you either have to have a body of work or you have to have studies in journalism to become a journalist. So these are things that we can introduce.
Also,
In the
don't
sequel-
forget, half the city just went to shit. So the likelihood of people wanting to stay in that city,
That was his motivation. You know,
The
if I just
planet
take
just
out,
lost like 40 writers that day.
no,
they
you know,
Clark just walked
somebody.
in and was like, "I don't mind working here," and they're like, "All right,
Wow.
you're hired."
that's a flashback I would have just liked to see. Is Clark in college, like his
Agreed.
college days setting that up.
Agreed. Now
I'm done. Let's move forward.
No, but the good thing is that taking a lot of the foundation stones
Yes.
that we find in Man of Steel, we know for a fact because Henry Cavill's back, because that's still that we got from him when he made the official announcement himself, we know that the Man of Steel suit is coming back. So that means there's a lot of the seeds of Man of Steel are going to be present. We don't know if other actors are coming back. It's very possible that some of them will be recast. Maybe they bring everybody else back. We don't know. But we know that this is going to be an evolution or the next step for the Clark and Superman that were presented. But of course, with a clear new direction, right? Do we need to address... Well, let's see. I'm going to make this simpler. Let's talk about what we want to see in the future. I'm going to start with Mike.
That's a hard question because I have no idea what this universe looks like after the Flash, right? We don't know what the landscape of the DC universe is going to be. Do we retcon BVS in a way to where Clark Kent doesn't die, right? Because they have it in the newspaper that Clark Kent is dead. So that throws the whole Daily Planet secret identity thing kind of out the window. So
They have it on a newspaper?
yeah, it says
Yeah,
in
dude.
memoriam. Clark Kent.
Oh, I missed it.
BVS, they killed Clark Kent.
In
Okay.
BVS, they killed
missed that.
two of my favorite characters. We just see like a tombstone with Dick Grayson's name on it in the background, and then Clark gets buried at the end of this movie twice, technically. So
Yeah.
Fair.
it was not a fun time for me. But assuming we kind of retcon that a little bit, I'd like to see a seasoned Superman. I want a Superman that's been doing this for a while, and maybe introduce somebody like Brainiac, right? Somebody, or you can even tell a more personal story, because all of these films that Cavill's been in, it's always felt like it were about someone else. Man of Steel feels like it's really about Lois, Zod, Jor-El. BVS felt like it was about Batman. Justice League, again, he kind of felt like a plot device again, because most of the movie, it was basically, we have to get Superman to help us with this thing. So I'd like to tell a very personal story about Clark. And I think introducing Kara would be a really good way to do it. He can she essentially fills that Robin type role, right? Where he's training her and imparting his knowledge into her. And then something like Brainiac attacks, for example. And like Brainiac is a threat that I think can harken back to Krypton. Like that's something he and Jor-El can even discuss about how Brainiac was from Krypton. And like that spurs a really personal journey between him and Kara fighting one of the last remnants from Krypton, for example. I think would be kind of a fun idea. More color, turn the color back on. His suit looked great in Black Adam. It was too gray in Man of Steel. So just turn the saturation up a bit. That's all I ask. And keep the score. I don't need the John Williams theme here. Don't do that again. Let him have his Man of Steel score.
So a comment to if you guys have any comments on the Mike thing, unless we all want to go, but I have a question for you, Mike.
Yeah.
Do you want Kara in the sequel, or do you want him to cameo in Kara's movie?
Is Kara's movie still happening? That's again the question.
Fair.
So any way I can get it, because we don't know what happens after Flash.
Do you just want to see mentor Superman?
I don't even need to see that necessarily. I just want to see Superman be Superman, and I feel like mentoring someone is one of the best ways. Because we see that in the comics, what he did with John for like half a decade, right? His son. That, I think, is a very good role for him. And people can stop saying Superman's overpowered and boring, and he can fix every problem by just existing. Which isn't true, but that might make people calm down a bit.
Usually
Yeah.
It's not Batman fan. Why are you here? Who invited you?
So Isaac, what do you want to see Cavill bring to the table now as he's back on Superman in the future?
Well, first off, I'm 100% with Mike. It's a bit hard to be 100% sure, considering we don't know how it's gonna look with Flash moving forward, or well, if they're even gonna release Flash at this point. But
they will.
That's a different.
Don't worry.
But I would like to see more grounded stuff, actually. And we have the big Doomsday. We have had Steppenwolf. Turn it back a notch. You can have your big sort of like a fighter that can put up a fight, but make it sort of like take Metallo or Metallo, Parasite, or maybe, and I know this is a long shot, but Superman versus the Elite kind of deal.
Oh, that'd be fucking sick.
Yeah.
No, Superman's boring, Juwaan.
No, he is, but that storyline was really awesome.
Stuff like that.
So, Juwaan.
I just feel that you can have someone that could give him a physical threat, but still dial back a bit. That I just feel feel that maybe just don't give me Lex Luthor and his power suit. I have never taken that one seriously.
Okay. Give me Luthor with the kryptonite in his veins that makes him strong. No, I'm kidding. That's not my take. But that was an interesting one. I liked that from Public Enemies.
Is it still Jesse Eisenberg? Because that'd be weird.
I would laugh my ass off if they would make him kryptonite.
It's Jesse Eisenberg playing The Rock, playing like.
Oh yeah, I couldn't even say have him fight Black. I guess that's an easy call, but make that Shazam 3, please.
Lex Luthor in my book should be brain, not brawn, if you catch my drift.
Yeah.
Well, from what I know of Lex Luthor.
Yeah. That's the one thing I didn't like Birthright that much, at least towards the end, but I really liked the Lex Luthor in Birthright. Juwaan, what do you want to see with Cavill coming back as Superman?
I do want to play a little off of what you said, jokingly. I kind of do want that, but the storyline, not necessarily Lex gaining kryptonite powers. But us being in a world where Lex Luthor's recasted, Bryan Cranston, but you recast him, and you have it to where he's running for mayor, right? Not president. I think that's way too big, right? Because then it's like, well,
Unless you
there's no way.
get Giancarlo Esposito to play.
Is this just Breaking Bad now?
He's got Marvel stuff to do. Well, don't play with me because I didn't even get into who
Jesse is Jimmy Olsen. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. And he just says bitch.
Miss White. He would say Mr. White again. Sorry. Yeah. Keep going.
But
let's do it,
so
bitch.
That's all I want, right?
Krypton,
save
bitch.
Me, bitch. But no, Lex Luthor's running for mayor. And you do this whole exposition of Clark trying to figure out what his actual motives are, right? And it leads them to a whole plan that Lex has. You bring in Metallo, right? You give us that visual of Superman overcoming that. And then I do want an end credit scene of Kara, right? But Kara bringing a message of looming doom. And that looming doom can be Brainiac. And what I wanted to say is, Mike, to play off what you were saying,
yeah,
I think it's best if we allow Superman to just have solo movies and let Kara be an event film, right? Let Brainiac and Kara be an event film that's separated from his individual movies. Because I think as a superhero universe, we've gotten away from event films. And some of these things are better off as solo events than you telling me you have to take up this whole person's movie where you're bringing in all these different things that I'm supposed to meet for the first time, understand. You separate it, give it a movie that you can introduce Kara properly, give that backstory. Brainiac is here. These two, you got to take them down. So for me, I would just like to keep it grounded, recast Lex, Metallo, Superman, end credit scene of Kara. That's where I would go with.
I find it interesting that you mentioned about keeping him in his solo films, because it takes me back to what I think is the most successful trilogy in Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is the Captain America trilogy, right? Like the only reason Civil War works, though it's not perfect, but the only reason it works is because we have plenty of time to root for Steve Rogers. So we can really get behind him and everything that he presented in Civil War and everything he did in Civil War.
I just felt like Civil War didn't progress his story anymore.
Right. But that wasn't the point of it, right? It was just about creating that divide.
I feel
love
like
it, but that's what I didn't like.
That's a different conversation. But I feel like it kind of does progress his story because First Avenger, he wants to be a soldier. Civil War, he is now distancing himself from the government. Like, hey, I need to be my own hero because these guys clearly don't know what they're doing after the fall of Hydra. And like I feel like it kind of caps that arc he was having throughout the trilogy.
And I feel like I had to dig through all the rubble of all the other story to get to that, as opposed to just a solo Cap movie where that's very clear. This is the focus. That's it. Civil War should have just been an event film. Well, I mean, technically it was, but
it was. But I agree with Mike. It did bring a lot to Steve Rogers' development while being also an event film. But it wouldn't have been possible unless we had spent all that time with Cap first, right?
Yeah.
Mario, I know you have nothing to say about the future of Cavill, but
I'm not recording an entire episode of my podcast later today on this very subject, but yes, what do I want coming up next? Brainiac. I want something where our Superman is fighting a sort of ideological challenge where he has to inspire hope and get people to realize an evil that's out there and pull everyone onto the same page. Where it's not just a big villain he has to punch; it's an idea he has to, drive into the heads of the people of Earth. You could tell a story where Brainiac is an AI form who actively spreads misinformation to try to guide humans to make poor decisions and creates its own sort of fake news and tries to influence elections and tries to do all kinds of other things because
Brainiac's just Twitter.
Yeah. But you could do a whole thing like that where, you could tell an allegorical story using Brainiac as the stand-in for technology, for social media, for fake news, for misinformation. And you have Superman go after that threat in a way that inspires humanity to have to stand up and think for itself and unite and not be divided by this harmful misinformation out there. So anyway, that's what I would like. That's the short version. Brainiac, a real ideological threat, a movie that kind of has a real sort of philosophy and allegorical theme for how we need a symbol for hope in our world in real life. That's all.
Cool.
I agree with that one. I'm changing mine.
So I want to expand a little bit on the one that Isaac mentioned, offshoot. And I kind of want to go back to something I wrote back in my Revenge of the Fan days. I did a whole series on the DCEU and DC animated film universe and how it contrasted a lot and why the animated films a lot of times were better than what we got, right? But I kind of want to see, if not the same villains, at least the same type of story of Superman versus the Elite. And the reason I want this, and the reason I love this story, is because it is a fight for the soul of humanity. It's not just the idea of a villain taking over or stuff like that. It's literally the fight for that soul, because you have this group of people, which can be anyone, can be any villain. Any villain can embody this idea of, which, interesting enough, it kind of plays into the future Black Adam Superman fight also. Because when you have an anti-hero that takes lives and says, okay, for the sake of justice, that's kind of the whole plight of the Elite, where they're powerful enough so they can be judge, jury, and executioner. And here's the contrast, which I love about it, is you have the younger folk that think that the old ways of trying villains or locking them up or stuff like that is antiquated and doesn't work anymore. Sometimes you have to give them the death penalty. You have to end them. There's no way of trying to make them turn to good. So these people as the Elite come with this propaganda of, hey, if you have the power, we're just going to kill the villains. We're not just going to try and save them. But then, of course, Superman stands as this symbol of hope that believes that humanity can be good, can be better. So what does he do? Is he going to follow the trend of the Elite, or is he going to stand up for that vision of right and be that symbol of hope and be that hero that we need, not the one that we deserve? Which, again, is the whole thing about Superman, right? It's not just the Dark Knight. Superman did it first, damn it. He is the hero that we need, not the one that we deserve, because he's going to do the right thing in spite of us. In spite of us rallying behind the Elite or these type of villains, or these type of heroes, it also brings into conversation, what is a hero? What should a hero be for humanity, right? And why Superman is the best hero. So if you want a story that reestablishes Henry Cavill's Superman as the Superman of our generation, then we have to recreate his image in an image that inspires the world and what justice looks like. That's why I love the idea is all whatever happened with truth, justice, and the American way, of course, but the hope for all and all that stuff. So it's a great way of reintroducing Superman, introducing what he stands for, and also bringing people into his fold and what he's all about. Now, the other side of things is that because the Elite is a very public enemy, you have something for Clark Kent to do. Because Clark Kent can then do the whole journalistic aspect of it. So we can see Superman both in Clark Kent form and in the suit working. So you can get a good glance of both sides of him. And what I like about it is that you can have Lois being that sounding board because he's asking himself these questions. Like, I took a chance on humanity. I took this leap of faith, but they think that these lack of morals is the right thing to do. Should I still stand up for them? So it's all this conversation that, again, this guy, Superman, decides to do this with a smile on his face because he believes that we can be better. And what better way to beat the villain than to win the people over so that people choose the right thing?
Bam. So your idea and my idea could work together. And even Juwaan, Brainiac is spreading misinformation to get Lex Luthor elected to mayor. And, it all works together,
Yeah.
And
And they
elite
create
are
the
there
elite.
as the goons Luthor has hired them as mercenaries to get people to turn against Superman. It's one movie. We just pitched it right here.
Yeah.
Here's James Gunn.
Dawn of Hope. Done.
Yeah. And again, if you're trying to, and it also, if we do something with that thesis, right, of having Clark have something to do with understanding the state of the world, Superman trying to inspire the world in the future, there's no reason why you shouldn't call this movie Superman, Man of Tomorrow.
Bam. What a great place to wrap things up, Brandon.
Yes. I mean, I got to steer the ship. It's the job.
Yes.
So, guys, any thoughts before we close on this amazing, divisive, but interesting and powerful conversation on Man of Steel and Superman moving forward? Any final thoughts, guys?
I'll just say I'm glad that it still seems to be in the cards for the new DC to keep Man of Steel. There was an interesting thing a few weeks ago where there was a highlight video clip thing that they aired before New York Comic Con, which basically showed what films they now consider canon and kind of which ones aren't by omission. But it showed it like the first DC movie is Man of Steel, and then it goes to Wonder Woman, then it goes to Aquaman, then it goes to Shazam, then it goes to all the stuff afterward. So it seems like, internally they're treating it like Man of Steel happened. The rest we're going to figure out a way to just never have to deal with again. So all I'll say about Man of Steel is, yes, it's divisive. It has things I love. It has things I didn't, but I'm glad it still seems to be in play, and it's still sort of the blueprint where we're going from here. And I'm good with that.
I will say to that, there's a very good chance that after Flashpoint, James Gunn brings out the Men in Black thing and says none of that happened, but the same actors are here.
Yeah.
There's so much red tape with what happened yesterday that it makes it hard to chart forward to tomorrow. But I still think that this movie should still stay within the history of Superman's story going forward. Like, it should have still happened. You know,
I also like the fact that James Gunn is one of the people now in charge too, because if anybody can find writers and creators that can breathe fresh air to these properties, I mean, he got people. I mean, he I think it's his cousin or something. I think that did Brightburn or something like that.
No, that's his brother.
That's his brother. But I mean, if he he can find people to do great stuff. It doesn't have to be him. But what a great
they all
person
have to have
to
the
do
last
that.
name Gunn, but yes.
Yes.
Oh,
I mean,
where's
either
my
that-
alert reminding me that I had to come off?
It's either that or a raccoon. So,
Yes.
Isaac.
I don't
Mike.
really have not much to say at
He's
all
in the
for
Phantom
this.
Zone.
He needs 5 minutes.
He's in the little from Superman 2.
He needs another 5 minutes.
Go ahead, Isaac. Did you have something? Sorry.
No, I don't really have anything else to add.
Like I said at the top, this is a movie that exists. Not a fan of it. Never watching it again. I only watched it for this podcast. Can't wait for the sequel.
Man. Oh,
Can't wait to see
okay.
more Henry Cavill Superman. Guys, thank you for joining me for the awesome TCA take on Man of Steel. Where can they find you, Mario?
They could find me over at the Twitter at Superman on Film, all one word. They can check the Fanboy podcast every Friday. And that's it.
Links in
Juwaan,
the
where can
description.
people find you?
they can also find us on the Twitter, Geek Vibes Nation, and also on YouTube for our weekly live podcast.
Mike.
You can find me at Novice Cinephile on Twitter, on YouTube, and on the Amateur Otaku podcast every Sunday. We're talking some Chainsaw Man, Bleach, My Hero Academia, and I feel like I'm missing a show. Oh, yeah, Spy Family. Fun times over there at the Otaku. So subscribe there.
Nice. Isaac, where can people find you?
Well, writing, Wobam Entertainment, Twitter, Emblemania.
And
That's
you can
nice.
find me at the Scarlet Fan 52 on Twitter, and you can find The Shatter After on Twitter at The Shatter After, and you can find our episodes at the Novice Cinephile Network. And if you want to listen to us on the go, you can find those Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, wherever podcasts are found. Do not miss any of our October episodes. We got Constantine, Werewolf by Night, Train to Busan, and we also have one more that I forgot it right now for some reason.
We've got Black Panther and Moon Knight dropping as well.
Yes. A lot of great stuff for the TCA. Guys, thank you for joining us. Have a good day. Stay awesome. Keep watching movies. Peace.
Superman shouldn't kick.
Superman shouldn't
You
kill.
know.